So in next an hour, we will get to hear ground updates from our India partner, Anil Heber, our Jeevan Sati Kiran Visa, and our development coordinator, Arvinda. My name is Kirti Khator, and I am a volunteer with Association for India's Development Seattle chapter. Being a aid volunteer for the last few years has brought tremendous personal growth as well as satisfaction. I think knowing and working with grassroots India partners energizes and encourages me every day. For all those who are new to our organization, AID was founded in 1991 with the idea of understanding and solving problems that plagued India. Since then, the organization has grown to 36 chapters in the United States with more than 1,000 volunteers. Quickly coming to today's agenda, we will begin with Ravi giving an overall update, aid update, and introducing all our esteemed speakers. We will start with Kiran, and he will talk about agriculture. Then Anil will talk about COVID relief efforts. And finally, we'll hear from Arvinda about the condition of public health system in rural as well as urban areas. Our organization stands for Sangharsh Seva Nirman, which is courage, commitment, and change. And I have the honor of introducing you to the person who started all this and imbibes all these with his work and life. Ravi Kuchimanji is the founder of AID and a Jeevan Sati. Ravi had a vision that problems are interconnected, so must be the solutions. And this thought of his has helped thousands of people in India. He continues to be the source of inspiration for so many volunteers today. Let's hear from him. Ravi, please.
Thanks, Kirti, for the kind introduction, and thank you all, for joining. I know that we only gave you a very, very short notice. So thanks everybody for joining. I'll just briefly give an update on the COVID work. So I was reading a few COVID statistics. If you kind of look at, if you see the news, then it'll say that India has had about 400,000 deaths. But excess death data in India is now estimating 4 to 5 million deaths have happened. And they are saying that about 2.5 million deaths just happened in the period from April through June 2021. So in that period between April and June, 2.5 million excess deaths happened in India. And this is like more than 2 times the usual number of deaths you would expect in that period. And that kind of puts it in context, the bodies in Ganga, the overflowing of the hospitals and crematoriums, the calls that AID was getting for oxygen cylinder, AID and several other groups were getting for oxygen concentrators, oxygen cylinders. All of this happened because so many million deaths happened in such a small period of time. And this is kind of unknown because the government just claims that 400,000 deaths, in the 2 years have happened so far due to COVID. We will hear, a bit later from Anil, who will tell us, AID supported Bombay Sarvodaya Friendship Center with about $450,000 to do work in Maharashtra and in Northeast India. And he will tell us about the progress of the work there. We have raised about $6 million this year for COVID support. And so far we have disbursed about $3.5 to $4 million. So we have about 2 million that we are planning to disburse next year with a long-term strategy, and also in case due to the new variants, if something comes up, we have money to react. Non-COVID fundraising has taken a bit of a hit because mainly donors have donated for COVID. So we are both the Seattle chapter and AID are looking to raise funds to support other work of AID, which is also pressing. So our first speaker will be Kiran, who has been working on agriculture issues. Kiran is joined AID when he became a graduate student at University of Maryland. He came from having done his electrical engineering at IIT Madras, and then he did his master's at University of Maryland. And while here, he started volunteering for AID, and and pretty much working full time for aid, while working also full time at Hughes Network, here, and he was literally having two jobs, one paid and one unpaid. And then about 12 years ago, Kiran decided to get back to India to work full time on farmers' issues and on the agriculture crisis. And I think many of you have heard and been inspired by Kiran's work in agriculture. Of course, farmers in India are, have been in the forefront news, and Kiran has also been speaking on their behalf about their demands on minimum support price and so on. Today, he will talk both about the work that he's doing with aid directly on the field as well as on the overall picture of agriculture. Hi, Kiran, over to you.
Thank you, Ravi. Very nice to be here. Hello, everybody. It's morning for us, and I guess it's evening for you there. So, good evening to all. So, it's always a pleasure to speak to the Aid Seattle group and also the the whole group of supporters and all of you who are not only financially supporting but also very involved in understanding our work and trying to see how to enhance it and so on. So that's a real pleasure. And like Ravi was referring, farmers have been at the forefront of news in India, and farmers' issues, I think, have become a discussion point even in the drawing rooms of people across the country and abroad also. One of the things that I would like to say is that, of course, this particular movement, it's a very special situation where so many lakhs of farmers have come out onto the roads because they felt that certain laws were against the interests of the small farmers in the country. However, in general, this also has brought to the forefront the fact that the farmer situation and what is happening in agriculture is very much tied to government policies and what the government should be doing and should not be doing. That plays a very big role. And not just in India, I mean, across the world, in any country, I think even in the US, the US Farm Bill, for example, is a major, topic of discussion whenever it comes up, I think every 5 years, because what kind of support systems the government puts in place for agriculture, like it does for any other enterprise and many other fields, becomes very important, and particularly in the Indian context is even more important because majority of the farmers are small and marginal farmers. So therefore, you have all these millions, like there are about 9 lakh farmer households who are directly owning land and doing agriculture, and there are another 6 lakh who are not owning land but still involved in agriculture. I meant 90 million households who own land and are doing agriculture, and another 60 million or so who don't own land but who are involved in agriculture. So therefore, being small players, it's very important for them, for the system to work for them, or at least be fair. It doesn't need to be loaded in the favor of farmers, but at least it should not be loaded in the opposite side, right? So that is something that when we started working on farmers' issues in India, basically motivated by two things. One is we were motivated by the fact that we need to move to a more sustainable model of agriculture where we don't use up all our soil fertility and water resources and deplete our natural resources in order to do agriculture, and also use a lot of chemicals and so on. So that was one angle in which we had got into this work with agriculture, because that was also making, this high input kind of agriculture was also making farmers impoverished. The other thing is, farmers being in distress, a lot of farmers committing suicide, and in general, the situation in the rural area in terms of economic situation being dismal, which once again has an effect on the entire country and entire economy, because there's a lot of distress migration from the rural to the urban. And that is one thing which has come to the fore also in this whole COVID crisis. People just could not imagine that there were so many tens of millions of people from Jharkhand and Bihar who are working in Hyderabad, and from from interior Telangana who are working in Mumbai, and so on, right? This is also tied to the rural crisis. So just coming to our work, what we have been doing is we have been working directly with farmers to support them, help them in various ways in certain pockets, where we are directly working in the ground. For example, organizing them as farmer producer organizations so that they can actually have a better collective bargaining power. They can set up their own processing units so that they can actually have a better control over the value chain, so that they are not only selling raw produce, but actually they can process and they can package, they can market, so that they can get a better share of the entire value chain. Or to help people, to farmers, to move to more sustainable forms of agriculture, and organizing farmers on at different levels. That is one aspect of our work. The other aspect of our work is basically to make sure that the government support systems, which are required to make agriculture sustain like any other enterprise, they are actually working for the farmers. For example, right, in the last couple of years in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, where I directly work, there have been very heavy rains, unseasonal. The rains came in the rainy season, but towards the very end, in October and November, and that is the time when there is actually the crops are almost ready for harvest, or the grain formation is taking place. And very heavy rains at that time actually causes extensive damage, because already for 3-4 months farmers have been cultivating the crops. So last year in October 2020, there was a huge rains in Telangana. Just like Chennai is in the news because of all the heavy rains and water logging and so on. In 2020, Hyderabad was in the news. Exactly the similar situation. However, when Chennai or Hyderabad gets flooded so heavily, also there is impact on the rural areas where the crops get flooded, damaged, and so on. But that is not so much in the news. So that is where we had reached out to see what is happening to the farmers whose crops are getting damaged. So there's extensive damage. And according to the Disaster Management Act, the government is supposed to provide compensation for the crop damage to a certain extent. I mean, it's a limited support. Actually, farmers invest about 20 to 30,000 rupees per acre for cultivation. This compensation that comes is only about 5,000 rupees per acre. But even that can be a lifeline because there is at least some recovery that the farmers can make. But even that was not being done. Actually, Telangana government did not give a single rupee or even initiate the kind of enumeration of all the farmers whose crop got damaged. So we sent a lot of petitions to them and so on. Finally, we went to the High Court because the government was not acting, and the government also had stopped the entire crop insurance scheme in the state, which is which is once again a lifeline, because when there's extensive damage, then the farmers have to fall back on crop insurance to recover at least some of their costs. So we went to the High Court, and of course the case dragged on in the High Court because the government was stonewalling. Finally, this September on 29th, we got a verdict which basically was in our favor. So what we exposed in the court is that the government had already made a survey district-wise, identified how many acres of land had got damaged, and totally it comes to about 15 lakh acres. So that's what 1.5 million acres of crop had got severely damaged. That means it's more than 33% damage. So that means the yield will fall by more than 33%. And they had sent this report to the center, requested funds. The center had sanctioned only a fraction of the funds. They had requested a couple of thousand crores, but the center sanctioned only about 200 crores for this. But even that 200 crores, the government did not reveal that they got the funds or made any effort to distribute them. So we got a High Court order which said within 4 months, you need to identify all the farmers whose crop was damaged and distribute to them. So with this kind of intervention, actually, we are doing two things. One is though we are a small team, see, we are about maybe 15 people working full time in various districts as well as at the state level, partly supported through the 8 projects. And we have a network of about, few hundred people working in various districts across the state. But the kind of impact that we've been able to achieve for the farmers would be of the order of, let's say, $25 million. I mean, if at least this 200 crores which came from the center reaches the farmers, it's about $25 million going to the farmers. So this is the kind of impact one can make if we are actually trying to make the government system work. The other thing is that now that they got a High Court order adverse against them, from the next year onwards, they will be more careful in terms of initiating the disaster compensation or the crop insurance scheme and so on from the beginning, rather than reacting after several months. This is one example of the kind of work that we are doing. Shripriya, can you start sharing the slides? I just put together to highlight 3 or 4 kinds of work that we are doing, which I'll go through quickly. I know the time is also short. So this is the Telangana High Court's landmark order, because it's the first time we got an order where the court said that this kind of a disaster compensation or running crop insurance scheme and so on, it is not just a discretionary thing. It's not optional. That the government implements it when when it is awake, and doesn't implement it in some years. It said it's the obligation of the state actually to implement disaster relief act and also the crop insurance scheme, and ordered that these 500,000 farmers, including tenant farmers who don't have land patta in their name, should all get compensation, and gave a 4-month time. Actually, now already about 2.5 months are over. We are continuing to campaign at the ground level to make sure that the farmers are identified, to make sure that district administration springs into action and so on. And if the government doesn't do it in 4 months, once again, we are going to go to court to file a contempt petition and force the government to do it. So this is one example of the kind of intervention that we are making on behalf of farmers. And there are many situations, I mean, there are many issues. There are many government support systems, from the land record system to disaster compensation to crop insurance to running fair market systems for the farmers, ensuring fairness in the market. So all these kind of things need to be in place for farmers to make at least a decent living. Next slide, please, Shripriya. So in this respect, one of the major initiatives that we have taken up is something called the Kisan Mitra Helpline, which is a helpline that we are running for farmers in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh in a few districts, where anybody can call, any farmer or agriculture worker can call with any problem, and we then either advise them on the phone on what they can do to address that problem, or also identify which department that problem has to do, because most of the problems that are reported has to do with some government department not doing its function properly. It could be about the land records not getting transferred into the children's name after their old parents pass away, so therefore they don't have access to any of the government schemes, or it could be the fact that there is a pest attack and the extension officials have not really reached out to the farmers to provide advice, which they are supposed to. That's part of their duty. So then they call the helpline. We alert the extension officials saying that there's a pest attack in this village, and then they go and fix the problem. So it is kind of acting as both an interface with the government departments to alert them to their role, what they need to do and where the gaps are. Secondly, it also becomes an accountability mechanism, because we also work with the district administration, with the district collector in these districts. So every couple of weeks, every week actually, we provide a report to them. What are the pending cases? What are the problems which have come to our notice, not yet got solved, and so on. So every month, the district collector does a review of all the pending cases of this, from the Kisan Mitra helpline. And that helps the district collector to keep a tab. It's an accountability mechanism. Otherwise, the reports that reach the district collector from the ground level officials is always that, everything is going fine, everything is being implemented properly. But the gaps get highlighted because we have this other feedback mechanism through the Kisan Mitra helpline. So many issues have been solved. We have handled about 13,500 distinct cases until now, of which about 9,800 have been resolved. The others are still pending. Some of them have to do with long-term government policy, so it may not be fixed also, but whatever we can fix, whatever we can get resolved, we are doing that. So this year, Untitled Chapter has been supporting the Kisan Mitra helpline, and we have expanded that from the original 3 districts to 5 districts. And now every month we are actually adding some more districts. This month we have a meeting with the Warangal collector. We already had a preliminary meeting in November. December we are going to have a meeting to launch the helpline in Warangal. Let's move on. I wanted to share some of the individual cases which we have been able to handle, but I think we can do that if there is time later. So this is one major initiative that we are doing, the Kisan Mitra helpline. And now this helpline has also inspired the similar helplines in a couple of other states also. And we are looking at whether we can actually help support or provide even logistical or knowledge kind of support to make those things happen. Because in our team, basically, we've now brought together kind of multiple talents, because normally there are many helplines which run, but in our helpline, we also have developed a very good IT system to track each and every problem, and then make sure that it gets resolved. And we've also have an interface where the government officials themselves can log in and check which are the pending problems against us, and then try to resolve, at least the ones who have the initiative. So just yesterday we had a hackathon in our office on Sunday, where some of the IT friends also came in. Even the additional collector of the Rangareddy district came to our office, spent several hours, because we are redesigning the interface which the public can have to the Kisan Mitra data. So that kind of work we've been doing. One of the strengths of the Kisan Mitra helpline is also that at the district level we have field people. A couple of them supported, from the aid project, but because we also have a network of people working on farmers' issues across the state. We have also a lot of people who are voluntarily coming in. Once a problem is referred to them, they follow up with the farmers and try to get the problems resolved. The other initiative that we are very involved is in Anantapur district, which is the driest district in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. It's a very drought-prone area. So there we've been supporting work where this is the grassroots work that I was talking about. So one is trying to make the government system work. The other is working in different districts directly with the farmers. Here, one of the key thing which there are two key aspects actually. One is there is a major initiative on sustainable agriculture and growing millet crops, growing crops which are more suitable to the dry land area, do not require much water, and also setting up processing units for those millets and helping in the marketing of that. Here, women farmers have come together. There's a very, very heartening example of about 10 to 15 women farmers coming together, and they're all landless. 5 out of them are from farmer suicide families, like their husbands have committed suicide, and because we work on the farmer suicides issue, we have been in touch with them to provide different kinds of support. Now they've formed a collective, and they've taken about 10 acres of land on lease, and they're collectively farming it, and now they're actually making a decent amount of income, growing vegetables and marketing them on a weekly basis, and so on. That's a very inspiring place where I've gone and visited several times, and you can see the women farmers also doing the processing, in the other photograph. But not only this kind of so this collective farming now has inspired similar groups to be set up in a couple of other places. So there are 3 places where now this kind of a women farmers collective farming is going on. I mean, these are all small initiatives, but can provide us a roadmap for ahead. So at a larger level, at the district level, REDS has also established 3 farmer producer organizations which are completely consisting of women farmers. And normally all the cooperative societies or anything are completely dominated by men. So therefore we have formed only an all women farmer producer organizations, and there are 3 of them, and they are functioning very well. Each of them has about between 500 and 1,000 women farmers who are members of that. So this is just to give a picture that we have both direct programs and also advocacy things. So this Kisan Mitra helpline is one example. The work with REDS at the grassroots level in Anantapur district is one example of direct work that we are doing. We are also working with farmer suicide families, trying to help them. Once again, there we have been able to put pressure on the government to give compensation as they should be doing, but they have they have been lax at it. So only about 25% of the farmer suicide families were getting support from the government. So through our campaign, we've been able to get another 750 farm suicide families to get 7 lakh rupees from the AP government. So that once again, that's about $7 million. This coming on 16th, on Thursday, we are doing a big public hearing of 250 farmer suicide families in Telangana, which have not received any kind of support. And we've got some senior people from the civil society as a panel of judges at the public hearing. So we are hoping that through the media attention and the reports that come out of that, it will put pressure on the Telangana government also to give support like the Andhra Pradesh government has done. Last slide, Shripriya. So just wanted to say that basically for all this kind of work, continued support is required. Just to give a financial picture, in the Kisan Mitra project, we've received about $38,000 of support from the Seattle chapter. But now we are going to expand that from 5 districts to at least 10, if possible more, in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. So that requirement also would be going up to about $45,000 or $50,000 for the Kisan Mitra project. The REDS project in Anantapur, about $27,000, I think, was the support this year. But that also is expanding with especially the women farmer producer organizations in order to set up processing units and so on. They would need some support, so that would be about $40,000 or so. So there are many initiatives that AID is involved in with agriculture and farmers. I mean, these are some glimpses of work that I'm directly involved in. There's much more that we can talk about, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiran. That was wonderful. I mean, the amount of work that you have done over the last 1 or 2 years is phenomenal. And I think because of COVID, all this kind of work that has been happening, we have not been able to project it because COVID has been like the main thing that has been in our focus. So I'm really glad that you shared this. So we raised about $6 million, Dilip, for COVID relief. And we have supported about $3.5 to $4 million so far on COVID work. And we'll hear from Anil next, to whom we had sent about $450,000. Our fundraising on non-COVID work has lagged a bit. So the kind of work that Kiran presented, like in agriculture, this kind of work is what AID Seattle is looking for raising funds now to support. So any help, in the area of supporting the kind of things Kiran talked about would be needed, because our regular fundraising has taken a hit this year because most people have donated for COVID relief. We do have about $2 million of COVID funds still left, which we'll be using next year for both long-term livelihood, nutrition projects, as well as, in anticipation of the next wave that might come. So we do have, some buffer amount. So if there are a couple of quick questions, I'll give Kiran a chance to respond to them. Dilip, Srivas, anybody, Saif, any questions?
I did have one question, Kiran. One of the things that struck me was, first of all, it's great to see the work you're doing. Obviously, I think it's, especially given the conditions that you guys have had to work in the last year and a half with COVID, it's fantastic. So one thing that intrigued me was, I saw that number 7 lakh relief to the families of suicide, cases or whatever.
Right.
which is a good number. Now, I'm just thinking in terms of, if I remember correctly, the average suicide was happening because the farmers were in debt of 50,000 or something like that, right? Something on those lines. So it almost feels like, we as in the government and everybody put together is willing to pay 14 times as much as compensation or relief after the fact. Whereas if you just, and I'm being very simplistic with this math, but it feels like you could have potentially saved, 14 families from actually going through that heartache and that tragedy of suicide, if maybe somehow we could have found 50,000 to prevent each of those deaths. And maybe I'm being too simplistic, so feel free to correct me here, but what's your thinking there? And the other thing, which I know you've addressed it a little bit in what you went through, is one of the things that I think some of us are pretty convinced about, which we've loved about what you guys are doing, is the advocacy work in terms of how you can get a multiplier effect from every dollar or every rupee that aid invests in whatever the effort is, by getting the government to kind of step up and do a 10x or 100x or whatever it might be. So if you can, address both of those. The second one is more in terms of how to get more and more scale out of whatever you're doing, because I think you guys are doing amazing work, but obviously India is a massive country. So given that, how do you scale to the point where you're able to impact more families?
Right. No, very good question, Srivats. For the first one, I would say that the average debt of the farmer suicide family is on an average, it would be closer to about 2 lakh rupees. Some families have a little more than that. Some families have a little less than that. I think the figure that you remember is about 70,000 from a presentation, but that was about 5 years ago, right? And that was the kind of on the lower end. I was trying to point out that even with 70,000 rupees debt, somebody could commit suicide. But now, on an average, when we are continuously doing surveys and studies of the farmer suicide families, it's about 2 lakh rupees, something a little less than that. But that your question still remains that actually the government should be doing something to prevent the farmer from committing suicide rather than giving an amount afterwards. Unfortunately, the government is not basically getting its act together. But there are two things here. One is that this kind of a 2 lakh rupees debt, that the farmer is unable to repay. This exists for maybe lakhs of farmers, out of which maybe 1 in 500 would commit suicide. So actually, numerically, if you see, the problem that the government needs to address is to make sure that indebtedness problem, or whatever is leading to that indebtedness, is addressed for all the 500 of them, rather than paying this 700,000 to the 1 out of 500 who commit suicide, right? So if you look at it that way, then the scale of the problem and the calculation, I think, becomes a little bit different. But that is where I think our initiative, like the Kisan Mitra Helpline, it's essentially an initiative to prevent farmer suicides, if you look at it that way, because every distress call that comes to our helpline is a person who could potentially take the extreme step, if they're not, there's no help coming through. So to prevent the suicides, one of the major things which is required is a sense that the system is responsive. Whether it solves your problem in 6 months or 1 year, people are ready to, everybody lives with hope, right? It's only when you find that the system is completely unresponsive, there is no hope, that they are pushed to suicide. So we are trying to get the government to say that, at least be responsive. You may not solve the problem or remove the debt for all the 500 of them, but if you are responsive, then at least you can 100 out of 500 the problem may be solved, and the other 500 have the hope that the system will respond. It is creation of hopelessness that is actually pushing farmers to suicide. So I hope that kind of answers partly your question. And the other thing that you're talking about is how to scale up these initiatives. So that's definitely a big challenge. I think that for the prevention of farmer suicides, definitely, I think this kind of a helpline we found it does really work. But to move it out to, in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, it took us 4 years to establish and run it properly in 3 or 4 districts. Now we are in an expansion phase. We are trying to expand it to multiple districts. Now we have a team which can actually support that. But then to start it in a new state is once again, you need to start from scratch because all the systems are working at the state level. Need to build a rapport with the state government system and with the district administration so that they see you as a value add. Otherwise, you are just another headache for the district collector. The district collector is overwhelmed with work. And they need to see that you are adding value to their work and have a constructive relationship with you. So to build that, also would take time. But I think definitely the Kisan Mitra model is scalable if we have that kind of a team put in place in some of the other states also. At the district level, within Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, we are already doing that. We want to expand to reach out to at least half the districts over the next couple of years.
Thank you, Kiran. So let's, we'll Kiran, you'll be staying
Ravi,
on.
I just wanted to add one thing.
Yes,
Connecting up with again the COVID thing. Actually, the fact that in many places, Anantapur is one example. We also are supporting grassroots partners in 5 or 6 different districts in Telangana and AP, and all of them have actually jumped in a major way to help with the COVID work also. So because these organizations are very intertwined with the communities at the in the rural areas, in the interior areas, that's the reason we've been actually able to reach out to all the remote areas where the health system may not be actually functioning properly. In the cities, the cases are more, deaths are more, but also the access to the system is also more. Whereas in rural areas, the cases are not visible and the access to system is much more remote. Because of the Red's Anantapur area has been exemplary in terms of their COVID relief work also.
Great. Thanks for adding that, Kiran. So we'll move on to the next speaker and we might come back to you for questions if there's time at the very end. Next, we have Anil, Anil Heber from Mumbai. But of course, he's been working all over India now. Anil has been working on COVID relief both in Maharashtra and decided to expand that work to Northeast. So he's been spending considerable amount of time in Northeastern states. So the work that Anil did, which was initiated with our support last year, which kind of scaled up to almost for providing food in the slums when the lockdown happened. And then it got scaled up by the local support. That was noticed this year by New York Times. And that's one of the ways in which aid was mentioned in the New York Times, because Anil had the presence of mind to say that aid had triggered the starting of this work. And aid has this year supported about $450,000 to Anil's work for meeting the second wave crisis in Mumbai as well as in northeast parts of India. So we'll hear from Anil on this work. Hi, Anil, you're next.
Hi. The New York Times was a fortuitous thing which happened just because I sort of participated in the vaccine trials and became the poster boy of vaccination because I was willing to talk. And then I was interviewed by a whole lot of people, and that's how it happened. Anyways, I'd like to thank AID for the support. They've been the backbone of support for Bombay Sarvodaya Friendship Center for more than two decades or more now. And during COVID, of course, we started off with the initial contribution of $10,000, which was sent for starting a ration relief work and also running a camp, 300 plus migrant workers camp at Warsaw along with the civil defense. And then it grew on, and in the second wave, we thought that we'll focus more on medical relief, healthcare related work. And the first project that we started was 101 bedded ICU complex at Vittalwadi, which is just about 60, 70 kilometers from Bombay. And then we moved to the Northeast to start our work. I would like to start the presentation. If you can put up the slides, I'll take you slide by slide.
Anil, can you spend 1 minute giving your background also that made it possible for you to do the work to help these hospitals?
Sure. So I come from a medical background. I have, in the year 2000, I started a company called Emergent Meditech, which was into healthcare. Of course, we are mostly into cardiology and cardiac surgery, introducing the latest technological advancements in these, like stents and implantable defibrillators, intravascular ultrasound, and a whole lot of things. So that gave me a bit of a background to take up COVID relief work in the domain of healthcare. And Assam, the Northeast has not been new to me. I have been going to the Northeast quite a few times. The first time was in 88, 89 when I cycled from Arunachal Pradesh, Itanagar to Oka in Gujarat, which was about 5,800 kilometers, along with Baba Amte, the social reformer. And since then, I've been associated with various things in the Northeast. So this time we thought that let's focus our attention in the Northeast because nothing much was being done there, and being hilly terrain, it was very difficult to access the remote population. So we decided to focus our efforts on the Northeast. And the first project came up in the end of May when an organization we've been working with, Shanti Sadhana Ashram, they wanted to have a 20-bedded COVID care center in their project at Guwahati. So I was not very keen on a 20-bedded center because it will get filled in a day, and then what do you do? So we asked them to give us a location to put up a larger project. So the first was we thought we'll put up a 140-bedded project. 20 beds would be funded by the World Bank Indian Employees Club, and 120 beds would be funded by BSFC. That's how we moved to Demaji, where they had an ashram there. But then when we saw the site, we felt that the number of toilets and all could be a problem. So we requested the district collector, Mr. Vijay Bhaskar Reddy, to give us a better venue. And he suggested the Demaji Engineering College, which was newly constructed but not open due to COVID. And that was the ideal location to start a center. So we first worked on putting up a 140-bedded COVID care center there. That is what AID had funded us for. And initially, when we requested AID for funds, it was for the 140-bedded center and 100-bedded hospital at Osmanabad, a COVID care hospital at Osmanabad, and another 101 beds at Vittalwadi. We finally did not go ahead with the Osmanabad project because we did not get the right type of support from the government, and there's no commitment to run it properly. So we decided to focus more on the Northeast itself. And Demaji gave us a request for 210 more beds. They wanted the project to be expanded from 140 beds to 350 beds, and we went ahead doing that. So that's the largest probably COVID care center in rural Assam, or maybe in India also, I'm not too sure. A massive 350-bedded COVID care center in Demaji district. And Demaji, for your information, is one of the remotest districts in India. Very, very backward in everything related to healthcare or whatever, because it's in the far easternmost part of the country and bordering Pasighat in Arunachal Pradesh, and a few kilometers later you'll get China. And in the entire district, there was not a single ultrasound machine which was working, even though about 17 deliveries take place every day in the district. So we also gave them an ultrasound machine, and I would request you to start the slide so that I'll take you one by one what we have done. So Bombay Sarvodaya Friendship Center, like most of you would be knowing, it started with work on watershed management. My colleagues Daniel Bhai and Michael Mazgaonkar and Anand Mazgaonkar have been at it for more than 3 decades now. It was started in 1982. And AID has been a supporter for more than 2 decades for this work. And slum amenities program is also something which AID has supported for the last 5 or 6 years, which my colleague, Mr. Bilal Khan, looks after. Food for Grains for Work program was also started in Gujarat by the Mazgaonkar brothers, and that's been carrying on very well. Education centers, we have started 3 education centers in the slums in Mumbai, and this has been progressing pretty satisfactorily. We have more than 1,000 children who have been attending these centers every day. Otherwise, they didn't have any facilities there in the slums, and they would have been victims to drug addiction and many other things. But they've been spending at least 3 to 4 hours in our centers every day, and it's benefited them a lot. And then COVID interventions and healthcare, which I'm going to talk about now. Yeah. Now, so this is the 350-bedded COVID hospital that we put up in Demaji. We had some very good exposure also we got when we did this, because 20 of those beds were paid for by the World Bank Employees Club in India. It was essentially for their own employees who are in Assam and the other states of the Northeast. So apart from that, the rest of it was funded by us. But then the Vice President of World Bank International Finance Corporation, Mr. Monish Mahurkar, happened to come for the inauguration, and so it got a lot of attention from the media and from the government. So we had the Health Minister of Assam, Mr. Keshav Mahanta, who inaugurated the project, and the Member of Parliament from Demaji, who also graced the occasion. And this was a very, very successful project. And from day one itself, we had more than 70 patients who joined, because they had some small centers in different parts of the district, and it was very inaccessible. Whereas this place is more accessible, and ambulances can bring patients very soon. And the government also changed the rule that whoever was COVID positive should come to one of these centers. Otherwise, they would spread the disease in the villages by not adhering to good practices. So it was occupied pretty much from day one. And that's why they wanted us to expand it from 140 beds to 350 beds. So this was this photograph was taken on the day of the inauguration, which happened on August 24th. Apart from the COVID care center, we made a detailed survey of the entire health infrastructure in Demaji district. What we found was that more than 70% of the district is populated by tribals, the Adivasis, and there was a lot of vaccine hesitancy in these areas. So one of the things that the collector requested us was for these vans. There's a small mistake here. It says 5 COVID dengue awareness vans in 5 districts of Assam. It is not 5 districts. It is in 5 blocks of Demaji district. Sorry for the mistake. So these are the 5 blocks that we had visited. Demaji, Jonai, Gogamukh, Sasaigao, and Shilapatar. So these 5 blocks of the district, we had 5 vans like these, which went around and spreading the need for vaccines. And in certain cases, they also would carry boxes of vaccine in those cold boxes, and then give the vaccines in the villages with the health workers in these vans. So this was pretty successful, and it went on for 2 months. We had 5 of these vans in each of the blocks, which every day for 2 months, it would go around announcing. One of the bigger threats than COVID we found during our visits was dengue. A lot of children were dying out of dengue. In fact, on the first day we went, we heard that 4 small children had died because of dengue in one of the blocks. And so we also printed colorful pamphlets on how to control mosquitoes, breeding of mosquitoes, and how to tackle dengue. So these vans were sort of multi-purpose. They handled COVID and dengue both. Here you see the health minister and the member of parliament flagging off. Mr. Mahurkar has also seen the first van that we flagged off. The next slide, please. The other major problem there was that the ASHA workers were not trained at all. They didn't have any equipment with them to do anything meaningful. They would just ask them to go to the district hospital. For everything, the only solution was district hospital, which was very badly equipped, and there was nothing there. So the tribal population had to go to the neighboring districts of Dibrugarh or Jorhat. And you can imagine what happens if a tribal patient goes to another district. It's impossible to get any type of treatment. So we thought that the best thing was to empower the ASHA workers first. So there are totally 746 or so ASHA workers in the whole district. So we had a train the trainers program for them. We had experts who came in from Mumbai and trained 20 of the trainers, because one of the major uh, difficulties is that the ASHA workers know only SMEs. Most of them are women from the villages, and even Hindi is not good. So there was this communication issue. So we decided that first we'll have a train the trainers program, and we trained 20 good ones among them as trainers, and they would then train the others first in the presence of our nurses, and then later they would carry it on their own. So we had a very successful 2-day train the trainers program, and we also came up with these kits for ASHA workers, where we had a pulse oximeter, a temperature gun, infrared temperature gun. Then there would be a glucometer. There would be a BP measuring equipment and a stethoscope, along with a few basic medicines like ORS and antibiotics and paracetamol and things like that, which they would need in their day-to-day work. So this was a big boost for them, because they had nothing before to treat patients with, and they just would ask them to go to the district hospital. But now they could initial things could be taken care of in the district itself. And the second thing also was that this gives an opportunity for them to earn a little bit money, because if the patient would spend a lot of money to go to the district hospital and then get the test done there or in the private. Whereas here, if somebody does a sugar check for 10 rupees or a BP for 10 rupees, the ASHA workers also would be incentivized to do work. Otherwise, their salaries are very, very low, and there's no incentive for them to work.
Anil, let me just add that ASHA workers are the village level workers from the employed by the government, supported by the government.
ASHA workers are the bottom of the pyramid. They are all hired from the village. Every village has a ASHA worker, and in Assam there are like in every state there could be, depending on the size of the state, 40,000 to 60,000 ASHA workers. The bigger states have about 60,000, and smaller states have lesser. So in the Dhemaji, for example, there are 746 of them. So they were the ones who have been trained. The next slide, please. Yeah. So I told you that every day there are 17 childbirths in Dhemaji district, and also a lot of other complications. So there was no ultrasound machine. So the maternal mortality rate is highest in Assam among all the states in India. So one of the targets we took was to reduce the maternal mortality rate and also help other patients who need surgeries like appendicitis and things like that. So this is the machine that we have given to them, costing about 20 lakh rupees, and it's really helped. Every day there are tens of ultrasound which is conducted. The next slide, please. Yeah. And in Maharashtra, I told you about the 101 bed hospital at Vithalwadi. This is a high dependency unit which has been put up at Vithalwadi to take care of any future waves of COVID. Apart from the equipment which we supplied, this was partly like about 1 crore of rupees we have spent from the funds sent to us by BSFC, and we needed almost 3 crores plus for this project. We also got the support from Give India for about 1.15 crore, and also they gave us an oxygen plant costing 1 crore of rupees, so we could complete this project with the money that we had. So there is a 666 liters per minute oxygen plant which has also been set up here, and you can see all the oxygen pipelines which have come in and the equipment going in. This hospital is actually fully ready now, and it's going to be inaugurated well in time for the Omicron wave that everybody is expecting. And the first Omicron case in Maharashtra was in this place, Kalyan Dombivli Municipal Corporation, where we have this hospital. The next slide, please. This is a 101 bedded hospital with a few dialysis stations also, and a mobile X-ray. It's a very high-end facility which has been put up. And along with this, since we didn't do the Osmanabad project, there are two other projects we took up. One is at Anjanvel in Konkan, where Yusuf Merli Center runs a hospital, which the government converted to be a 20-bedded COVID care facility. And the other one that we are now doing is in Nanded district at Kinvat, where we will be supplying equipment to put up a small ICU in Sane Guruji Rugnalay in Kinwat, which is again a 95% tribal district. 95% of the population there are tribals. The next slide, please. So the Kalyan Dombivli Municipal Corporation had a function to sort of recognize the work we have done there, and I was on behalf of all our supporters, I was recognized in a small function they had on their foundation day. We had received a total of $450,000 from aid, and we had requested aid to give us before June 30th because we're not sure when our FCRA would be renewed and all those procedures. It's still not happened. It's there. Our application is there in Delhi, and they've told us that there's a 2-month delay in because of the huge rush there is for processing the applications. And so we had requested for the entire money for our plans for the whole year to come in before June 30th, and that's how we had got $450,000 then, out of which more than half has been spent now, and about $180,000 are still with us. But we have a lot more programs which we have planned. Like there are 29 PHCs in Dhemaji district. We want to upgrade all the PHCs so that everybody does not have to come to the district hospital. They can be treated at the PHCs itself. So we have a revamping program for the PHCs. About 14 of the labor rooms in district hospital in the PHCs are being revamped. Many of the pathology labs also in the PHCs are being revamped with the funds that BSFC has given us. The remaining funds that we have would be used between now and March when we have planned all these things. So that's in short for what we have done. Apart from this, we have also done some other things like based on the requests that we have got from different chapters of aid. But I have not mentioned it here because we have done it from other funds we had raised and not from the money we got from aid. For example, in Kashmir, we gave about medicines and ration kits worth about 2 million rupees for a group in Kashmir. And there is Beba Collective to whom we gave ration kits. And we also gave oxygen cylinders, about 60 of them to Mahendragarh district in Haryana, based on one of the aid chapters requests. So these are all some of the other things that we have done on healthcare. And I'm not touching any of our other work like livelihood programs and things like that, which have been going on with some other fundraising. We have been active on the crowdfunding sites also. So we raised some money there. So we've done a lot of livelihood projects also this year. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anil, for that, for that wonderful presentation. And I also just want to give a little bit of context before we move on to the next speaker. Is that like, I think one of the opportunities, or I shouldn't say opportunities, or one of the needs that we have been trying to meet here has been to, support infrastructure in government facilities. This is not something that aid has done in the past. So it's been new area, both, for groups like Anil in India to work on and for aid to support. But during this COVID crisis, it became clear that, some intervention from the NGO sector or working with the government to step up its infrastructure in villages or in remote districts would be of help. And on an experimental kind of a basis, aid and Anil and several other groups have got involved in these kind of efforts. So Anil is closely monitoring how this equipment that we have sent to various places will be used. But this kind of involvement in infrastructure has been a new direction for aid. I can take one question and we can then move on to our last speaker. Thanks for everybody's patience. So anybody has a question? Okay, if not, let's move on, and then Anil and Kiran are anyways take. Yes. Go ahead. Did anybody have a question? Okay. Next, I would like to introduce.
I think it's an echo from your side.
It's an echo from our side. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
sorry.
Nobody is having a question.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm just thinking somebody's asking a question. Sorry about that. Yeah. So next, I would like to introduce Arvinda. So Arvinda is somebody who has grown up here, and then when she was 16, she had gone to villages in India and ever since have been interested in helping out. For several years, we went back to work in the Narmada Valley and in Srikakulam district in Andhra Pradesh. And lately, we have been in the US. So Arvinda is also the development coordinator of AID, and she's been interacting very closely with the Sati group, which Abhay Shukla, and others work. And Dr. Abhay Shukla had presented before in Maharashtra on healthcare. So Arvinda will give us the latest on what Sati has been doing.
Yeah, thanks. It's very nice to be with all of you and take a moment to look at the impact of the work you have made possible during the last year, in particular with Sati in Maharashtra, and also give you a preview of their plans going forward. I'd just like to step back a bit to the big picture of Sati's goals. Sati is been part of the movement, the right to health movement globally and at the India level, the People's Health Movement in India, and the Health for All Now, which was the Alma Ata Declaration of 1978. So it's part of a long-standing global movement whose counterpart in India, the Campaign for Universal Healthcare, has actually made some steps forward at both the national and state level. So here I'm just showing you the schemes at the national and state level that commit to free quality healthcare for all eligible families, which will be more than half the families. The majority of families in India will qualify for these schemes and have the right to healthcare. But how do you translate this to reality at the ground? This is what Sati has been working on, for decades, and AID has been supporting different initiatives over the years. So this has gone on from before the pandemic, and in some ways, we can see that the work that they did during the pandemic actually provided added momentum, and I'll illustrate how that happened. So Sati has always taken a holistic view of health. Health is not limited to health, but it also has to do with food and water and employment and transportation and everything, right? And so similarly, when the pandemic struck, they never took a kind of single virus approach to the pandemic. From the beginning, they knew that they would have to look at it in terms of access to healthcare. Maharashtra being the state that was worst affected, even by the single virus of COVID and everything that falls out from that. There were over both years, the total number of COVID deaths officially counted in Maharashtra was 1.4 lakhs. The case fatality rate was over 2%, and the total number hospitalized was 1.5 lakhs. And in the second wave of COVID, the majority, like 2/3 of the cases, were in the rural areas. So Kirti, can I have the next slide? One of the needs that Sati identified at the very beginning was, you're advancing quickly. Anyway, well, just providing accurate information. First of all, we all know what the impact of rampant misinformation has been around the world, whether it is due to the disease itself or the vaccine or the medicine and all of these things, and the sense of chaos and insecurity and helplessness. To combat all of that, they prioritized gathering accurate information and disseminating it, and also having helplines. So, okay, go ahead, Kirti, the next slide. They started with a telephone helpline. This was last year. On top of it, they added help desks. Next slide. They placed help desks in 3 rural hospitals, with people who, and this is something they actually wanted to do since before the pandemic. Because access to healthcare was difficult for people without money and connections, long before the pandemic. And they wanted help desks in hospitals to just direct people where to go and make sure that they get treated with dignity, and they get access to the care they need, and they don't get overcharged. That's another that obviously you will not have access to healthcare if you cannot afford it, or you end up in debt. And that's also related to the medical debt is also compounds the crisis we heard Kiran speaking about, which is also the agricultural crisis. Before the pandemic, hospitals were hesitant to allow these help desks. They saw accountability and access, these people who are advocating for access and accountability, they saw them as some more of a headache than a help. Whereas when the pandemic hit, it just became obvious that, we cannot handle this ourselves. And so they actually welcomed these help desks in these hospitals. And last year they started with 3 in rural hospitals. Next slide, please. And they also had patient advocates who worked in the Pune urban areas. And they would just answer all questions that people might have. They were able to help many people be able to follow some sort of treatment at home. People who needed to come to the hospital. Next slide, please. They had a desk. Oh, okay. This is where Anyway, people who came to the hospital, they had a desk where they would, they just provide a certain sense of order and take away that sense of isolation and hopelessness that made access to care so difficult. And when the second wave struck, it was very clear that they needed to expand this. Instead of only three desks in the rural hospitals, it was expanded to 22. And this was done because they were able to do this right away because Sati, like I said, has always been part of the People's Health Movement, and they have been connected with other movements in Maharashtra, whether they're working on right to water or land, farm workers, right to transportation, employment. All of these movements obviously were impacted by the pandemic, and so all of them came to take right to health training. All of them recognized that this was something where they could directly serve people in need, health being not only a primary need, but kind of connected to all other rights, which is, something Sati has been saying for decades. So they had these trainings online and trained movements in other districts, other blocks in Maharashtra to understand right to health and be able to provide these help desks. Next slide. Next slide, please, people. So this is what the scene would look like in a hospital. Next slide. They would, each person would get a card. They would follow up on their cases. They assisted with vaccination. They went into the hospital and made patients aware of their rights. Now, another campaign point of Sati and the People's Health Movement, Jan Arogya Abhiyan in general, has been not to overcharge. They have fought for rate regulation in hospitals. In the pandemic, the government granted rate regulation for COVID only. So starting with that, they gave people these rate charts so that they would know what so that they don't get fleeced by the hospital. Next, please. However, still some people were fleeced. So I was going to get to this. As a result of having networks in more than 20 districts in Maharashtra, this time when they wanted to collect data on people's experience with healthcare, this is another campaign that they have been doing since long before the pandemic, finding out people's experience with the healthcare system, when they have been denied care, what would have made things better, all this kind of information, whether it's just quick surveys or having interviews. In the past, this, it would take a long time to interview a critical mass of people and collect data and then advocate for it, hold public hearings, and try to bring this to the attention of authorities. This whole process took a long time. Still, some progress was made. But what happened in the pandemic, because the network grew and because everybody learned how to use Zoom and could have these meetings, very regularly, they were able to conduct a survey in 34 districts and find out about different aspects of people's experiences. But the one key experience that was reported, throughout was overcharging in private hospitals. Government hospitals often, didn't have adequate facilities or medicine or equipment or beds or whatever it was. I mean, they didn't overcharge, but sometimes you couldn't get care there. Private hospitals, it was found in this survey, among the respondents, 75% of the people were overcharged, and the average amount that they were overcharged was 1.5 lakh rupees. And these are people who are daily wage workers. These are people who haven't worked because there's no virtual option. So this is devastating. And in some cases, it was much more. There were cases of even 20 lakh rupees overcharging of poor families. And in Maharashtra, actually, the government has recognized a category of individuals as COVID widows. It's not a phrase that I really like to use, but the Maharashtra government has recognized this category because not only did Maharashtra suffer the highest death toll, but they did find that it was, disproportionately impacting men of not even that elderly, many of them kind of middle-aged or even lower middle-aged. And so there were many women who were left, struggling to support a family with no income and no, no support of the husband, no income, and sometimes young children, and debt. And on top of this, they were in debt. So I'm going to we're going to show you some of the statements of some of the women who spoke up. I'd see this is the other part. Even when you manage to collect data and stories of people, for someone to be brave to come forward and go public with their story, that also takes a lot of mobilizing moral support, which became possible this time around because of this critical mass of organizations that were involved at the grassroots. And the government had to accept that this overcharging was a serious problem. The Supreme Court took cognizance of it, and they actually said that people who had been overcharged could bring their bills and demand refunds from the private hospitals. Can we have the next slide, please? Oh, next. So once that was declared, then the movement put out notices asking people who were overcharged to contact them. They had tried this out in a few cases and succeeded. Next slide, please. People got refunds from the private hospital. It never happened. Sends a shockwave through the system that you cannot get away with overcharging people anymore. Again, the movements on the ground are very much galvanized because here you're seeing, you are seeing real money. You're seeing that we are able to help you address your grievance and get your money back, and to stand with dignity and say that you cannot just be taken for a ride at your most desperate moment. They can't just get away with just charging you anything. And so, I'm sorry, but this is, to give people vent for this kind of emotional release and sharing of their grief. The movement Jan Arogya Abhiyan, of which Sati is a leading and central force, organized something called the Santap Sabha, or anger assembly, where people could vent their frustrations, see that they were not alone, and advocate for some redress of their grievance. And so now, Kirti, I would like to ask you just to show the first, I think 4 minutes of the video. I think will give people a good idea of this process. We were estimating with, if you take the average rate of overcharging and the total number of people who had sought care in private hospitals, if you extrapolate it to the whole number of people who were whose family members were hospitalized, it would actually come to 9,000 crores. Now, let's just take a lowball estimate and call it 1,000 crores. Then, that 1,000 crore rupees is like $125 million. If they had never been overcharged, all of this money would have been in the hands of the people. All right, let's see the beginning of this video. I'm afraid the audio is not coming. Well, while she's working that out, I just wanted to say that, so the next step is, how are these people going to get this money back? So that's one component of the next, the work that Sati is doing, as we speak and going forward, is just providing technical assistance. People have to find the medical bills, find, different They don't always have bills, they don't always get receipts, but there's still possibly some way to follow up. So this kind of technical support so that people can document their cases and follow through is one component of what Sati's doing. But the larger component going forward, as I said, this is kind of moving beyond the pandemic centric approach or the COVID centric approach and just go back to right to health as a whole. If people had not been overcharged, we're talking about at least $100 million, if not, much more, that would have just been in their pocket. Right now we're saying, okay, maybe, we're asking you to support, this many $1,000s to possibly help people get back this much money. But what if it hadn't happened in the first place? And what if it hadn't even happened, not only for COVID, but for anything? What if people simply received quality healthcare as a right? They would not have this insecurity. They would not have this stress that would in turn contribute to greater health. And, that is actually achievable. So the systems that the government has in place to make these health insurance schemes work and all of that stuff, now that with the energy of the people's movements that has come behind this issue of right to health, and with the government schemes, the Ayushman Bharat, the Health and Wellness Center, the Rogi Kalyan Samiti, all of these committees, to make them function. The next item on the agenda is to train a cadre of activists in the rural blocks and districts to make all these systems function, to make people aware of these committees, to make people aware of their rights, of the schemes, to interface with the government and make these function. And just as the help desk started last year in 3 districts, but then this year expanded to 22, 3 districts, and this year 10 districts, 22 blocks. Next year, the work in making the health system, the health and wellness centers and the Ayushman Bharat schemes function. Sati is beginning that work in 3 districts next year, but ideally plans to expand this throughout the state and throughout the country so that right to health is something that people believe in and achieve in every state and district, just as right to information started in Rajasthan and went national and now is just part of life, so will right to health. And that's the work that you have been supporting, and we seek your support to continue and grow it in the future.
Thank you so much, Arvinda, for telling us about the work that Sati has been doing. Like Arvinda said, this work has been supported by Seattle chapter and continues to be supported. I think even last week, Seattle volunteers were voting to, support this work. Now, I think since it's getting late, if we have any questions for any of the speakers, Kiran, Anil, and Arvinda are all here. Maybe we can take a couple of quick questions and then we can call it a day.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, because that's, it's a little bit shocking, but not totally surprising to see that people who are already in such dire straits are being charged an extra 1.5 lakhs or whatever. I mean, that's maybe this is too big a question. Maybe we can take this offline, but this is the kind of stuff that you look at and you're like, first of all, how are people getting away with this? And then this is obviously a bigger thing than just in the time of COVID, right? I mean, this is obviously something that these guys do all the time, and they're gouging these poor families. I mean, what do you think can be done, I don't know, at a more systemic level to address something like this? Because this is the kind of stuff that's just like so wrong, just shouldn't happen.
I mean, I have a lot of hope in the plan that they, the action plan they're taking now. First of all, documenting all of these cases is what made the public take notice of this, much more so than they have before. I have been attending these kind of public hearings on denial of right to health care, for, I would say, 2 decades. But this time, it came in all the press. The Supreme Court gave an order. I think finally they realized that, and somebody got a check back. That was huge. So just knowing that, you cannot get away with it, I think is what will change the behavior. Many I mean, there were so many, doctors and nurses that were working overtime, that were working without charging anything. It's not. I don't think it's a fault of individuals like that. At least there are many who were working like that, I will say. But the system somehow created these avenues for corruption. If I could take a minute, I want to quote this one doctor, who was so excited by this campaign to stop overcharging. He wrote this long note to the Jan Arogya Abhiyan, and I'll just read a small excerpt. He says, "So long as the right to health is formulated in laws, it will remain a formal right whose real effect is somewhat unpredictable. It is only when the right itself is felt in the bones of the people as an answer to their experience of being wronged that a formal right will become a real right." So he was responding to the Santap Sabha, which video we tried to show you, that, this is what helps people feel that right in their bones. And I think that's when, I think it's a kind of a, chicken and egg, but in the positive sense, like when the rights are respected, people will stand up more for their rights and demand that respect.
Arvinda, just to continue the same question, Ankur had a question he's not able to pose, but how would you prevent hospitals from overcharging in future? Are they getting fined because of this when they found out? Do you know they are being fined, or?
I don't know if they're being fined. When they give the refund, I don't know if there's also a fine involved.
I think Saif had a question.
Yeah.
The Maharashtra government has said that they will audit the bills of all the private hospitals.
Mm.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Kirti?
Yeah.
Kirti, just one.
Yes.
Now, I just wanted to add a point on that, because we face the same kind of situations here also in Hyderabad. We were also running a helpline for COVID affected patients and their families and so on. And this whole thing, I think part of the reason why the government also doesn't step in is because there is a nexus, right? And some of the people who are running these hospitals, the big corporate hospitals, are directly connected with the political leadership. Not all of them. I'm saying that if, let's say, that 2 or 3 major hospitals are connected, then the government would not take any systemic step to control the prices and so on. So I think the public outrage becomes important. And earlier, I think the people would just think that, okay, this is part of the system, we cannot question it, and even if we question it, it is just a cry in the wilderness. Therefore, let's accept and move on, because obviously, even other than COVID, they would be facing this situation at a time of desperation. So they can't make an issue out of it and offend the hospital, right, or the health system, because they have to. That health system, that hospital has to save your family member's life. And then once you and they don't even discharge the patient before you pay the bill. And once you pay the bill, get the patient discharged. After that, you can just bang your head against the wall. Nothing much is going to happen. So it's basically this kind of a thing. It's essentially, making profit out of the desperate situation of the people. So I think that is why this COVID crisis bringing up this thing in a very stark way, then leading to public outrage, then enough people experienced it in a short time that it actually pushed the system to respond. I think that is that's what seems to have happened. But then the gains of this need to be carried on to the post-COVID period, and that is where I think that this should move to a push towards a better regulation, and also the public. Like some forums for the public to bring out these kind of overcharging situation, like the Santap Sabhas kind of a thing, but maybe in a different form. Continuing to happen like every 3 months or every 2 months, so that people know that they have a forum where they can go and present their cases, and then there is a public shaming of the hospitals which are doing it. So that, along with the government's regulation, I think all of that needs to go together.
Yeah, of course, Kiran, thank you so much for that. It's always inspiring to listen to all of you. AIDS Seattle is always fortunate to support these wonderful projects, and a big thank you to all the donors who have been supporting AIDS Seattle chapter for last 13 years. So just to give a quick update on AIDS Seattle support, which we did last year. So we supported close to 100K, which is other than the COVID support we did to our project. And typically our budget is close to 150 to 100K. So we would request all the donors to please generally support us so that we can reach that funds this year. Again, I would thank all of you, Ravi, Anil, Arvinda, Kiran, and all the donors to make this event possible, and a special thanks to AIDS Seattle volunteers who have been there always with us. So Shripriya, Samyukta, if you want to add, please add to it, and then we can close. If anybody, we'll send an email with all the details after this event, and of course you can reach us to us anytime if you have any question related to any other projects. So thank you so much for this. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I'll just add a quick note as well. Thank you so much. This is, the times we live in, the work that we all do and the amount of need that seems to have increased, particularly in the segment of people that can't help themselves, is a lot more than the last couple of years. And these are the years where we ourselves are feeling the pinch of not being able to meet in person or raise awareness or, raise donations for the most important causes. Simultaneously, we are seeing the need is also growing while we are not able to even, think about the traditional ways that we used to raise awareness and raise donations. We are also all looking at our playbooks and seeing what can we do better when such overwhelming crises happens. This group continues to remind and inspire how we can actually do something about it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Venkat. Thank you. So on that note, we will close today's event. Thank you, everyone.
So,
thank you,
I
Ravi.
just wanted to also just add one thing. So I just wanted to introduce, some of the volunteers here to Saif and Dur and Srivats. So Venkat actually does phenomenal fundraising for aid through cultural programs, especially from the Tamil community, right? Kirti, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, Ravi, you're right. So there's a PMP event show which we used to do because of COVID. We're not able to do for the last couple of years. But yeah, Venkat is one of the main, I would say, person who brings everything together. Yeah.
Yeah, he raises. I've sometimes seen that these events raise $100,000 and amounts of that kind. And Neumann has been our fundraising coordinator for aid overall for the past 2 or 3 years. And Neumann, have you now moved to the Seattle area?
Yes, I now moved to Seattle. I moved a few months back.
Okay, great. And Sripriya has actually been a volunteer for aid for a very, very long time. And she's, of course, into so many things. Thanks, Sripriya, for your support over so many years.
Thanks, Ravi. It's obviously your work, Kiran's work, very, very inspiring. Arvinda's work. What Kiran and Arvinda shared today really literally brought tears in my eyes. So thank you so much for the work that you guys are continuing to do.
Thank you. And of course, we are also supported by Ankur, who is with Kirti. And Dur has been, supporting, Srivas and Dur have been supporting aid, Saif and Dilip, as the advisory board. and their support to it has been phenomenal. Recently, I was talking to Dur about possibility of making some videos, and she was giving her inputs on that. Dur, would you like to add something?
I think everybody's already said everything, but I'm so glad to have heard all the updates about everybody who's doing such good work on the ground. We're so happy to always be here to support aid, and as you know, I'm always happy to step in and do a little bit more also. So I'll have a separate conversation with you about the videos as well.
That'll be great, though. And Samyukta actually recently had a baby, and still, like within 3 weeks after the baby, she is back active in it, like rallying everybody. So Samyukta, why don't we also see you for a minute?
Actually, I was going to say that in most of the Zoom calls that we do, at the end of the call, we request everybody to switch on their videos so that we can all have all the faces at the same time on the screen. Could everyone do that? Yeah, nice. Venkat, Ankur, Saif. Saif.
I don't know. I think Ankur has some issues.
Okay, great. Wow, now we have everybody. Yeah, nice to see everybody and, joining and hearing about all the work. And like Sripriya was saying that Arvinda's presentation also moved me to tears. So I think that this work, we are very emotionally invested in what we are doing. And it's really great that all of you are also very, so involved in what is happening here. Samyukta, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks to Srivat, Saif, and Dur. Thanks for joining us today. Your support has always been very, very helpful to the Untitled Chapter. So thanks for your continued support and all of the volunteers. And thank you, Kiran, Anil, and Arvinda for sharing all the details on the work.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, everybody.